now it turns out there are a lot of photos that he took of himself bound in the same ways that he left his victims. These were trophies and prizes for himself to relive his murders after they were long over. He would actually put himself in his victims' lingerie. He would use some of their personal items, and he would actually recreate whether they were hanging upside down or whether they were bound and gagged and blindfolded or whether they were tied up or whether they were half buried. He reenacted all of this. So big warning. Here is your biggest warning. I gave you one before. You've had plenty of time. Please get the kids out of the room. I'm going to show you Dennis Rader's photos of him reenacting his murders. There it is. I can't be any more clear to you about how graphic and upsetting these pictures are. This is one of them, where he half buried himself. This is another one where he had a wig and weird makeup and lingerie of his kills. This is another one, bound after extensive torture and buried. This is one, let's try and get that banner down. Okay, this is one hanging upside down. This is another one hanging from a tree. Again, these are all Dennis Rader himself in these photos. And there's some interesting clues in these photos. So interesting, in fact, that these old photos of Dennis Rader's are now being used to yield clues to solve cold cases that they think might be actually tied to him. So again, I need to reiterate, if you're just tuning in, these are not the victims. These are Dennis Rader reenacting what he did to his victims, using some of their personal effects, their clothing, and some of the items that he may have actually had with him when they were killed. There are 3 cases that these photos might actually pertain to, might actually have evidence to link to Dennis Rader. One is Shauna Garber, 22 years old. She was found near Pineville, Missouri, killed December 1990. Okay. She was likely killed in October, found in December of 1990. Found sexually assaulted and restrained. A half dozen different bindings were on her. There's another case, a cold case in Oklahoma that's unsolved. The photos may pertain to that case as well. And then there's a third case that's being investigated regarding those photos, and that is a missing woman from Hays, Kansas, who went missing in 1983. These are cases we had not heard of before now. I want to bring in Osage County, Oklahoma Sheriff Eddie Virden, who's been working on the dig that we brought to you last week that yielded a lot of evidence. Sheriff, I am so fascinated by this new aspect of this investigation. Look, it's new to us. I know it's not new to you. But can you give me a bit of an indication of what is in these photos that is informative to you while looking at these cold cases?
Yes. Well, of course, when we started digging through the files, we located those Polaroids that he had taken himself. And there was a series of 9 photos that he took on one of his convicted cases out of Wichita, and in the series of 9, he has written that he is wearing articles from 3 different projects, one of them of which was the Davis murder there in Wichita, and then he named 2 other projects that some of that clothing was from. And as we went further into that, then we developed or found or located 9 more photographs that were dated shortly after another project that he had marked in October, which he called Mossy Lake, which we believe is possibly related to the Garber case.
And I just want to be clear for our viewers who didn't see our programs last week, it's become clear that Dennis Rader uses the word project for his murders. And he uses codes, which we'll get into a little bit later, for confirmed kills and projects in his writings. But when you talk about a project, I know that there was something called Project Dogside. I think that was Doris Davis, killed in January of 1991. Did you believe that there were items of clothing depicted in the reenactment pictures of Doris Davis and her murder?
Again, I can't say there were kills, but he noted specifically 3 projects, one of them being what he called Dogside, and then another one he called Project Prairie, and another one I believe, was Project Cap. So he noted that he used those articles in those photographs. So then when we found a series of 9 more that were dated within days of what they believe Garber or when Garber was killed, we started looking at the items that he was wearing in that and matched those items back to a special map that he mailed to law enforcement back at the time, where he marked it as 160 and then marked a spot on that map for a location for the victim's body to be placed in the woods. And in those photographs, we had been looking at another unsolved case in Oklahoma, and that victim was missing 4 different items that they were last seen with. One of them was a red blanket, one was a black blouse, and in those photographs, there's a red blanket that appears in one of those pictures and a black blouse, and then in a couple of the evidence photographs taken when they served a warrant 2005, there's a blue suitcase that matches the description of the one that victim was last seen with, and then also a purse that matches a description. And again, those are just descriptions in the original report from 1990. But if you go to the timeline that he had, or the notebook where he had those, he has a note in there for an Oklahoma case. He's got an Oklahoma kidnapping. And then for the time period when the Oklahoma victim was last seen, he's got a notation of a project. And then when you find, 4 items that match the description in that report, you've got to really look deeper into that.
So to be clear, the Hays, Kansas victim, is it true you found information that he was watching a location where she worked and that he purchased a mask near where she worked?
Yes, and in some of his other notations, he makes mention of a location that she had worked at from the information we received, and then other indications of him digging a grave along the river somewhere in that area. So again, we can only say what we found and what it leads us to believe, and the investigation is going to continue.
Is there some kind of sensitivity behind not releasing the names of the Hays, Kansas victim and the Oklahoma victim?
Absolutely. Those cases are not our jurisdiction and not our cases. So, I'll leave that up to the agencies that are working those cases. We've provided those agencies the information that we feel pertains to their cases, and of course are willing to help any way at any request. But again, that's going to be their decision, on where they go and what they do with the investigation. We're just providing them the information that we put together through our investigation that we feel like could relate to theirs.
Sheriff, let me ask you, we talked last week about the dig at Dennis Rader's former home and what it yielded, the binding devices. You showed us the pantyhose with the knots in them that he would have used as a ligature. You mentioned there was jewelry and hobby items and other things like perhaps chains, other binding devices. Are you further along today than when we spoke last week in finding evidentiary value from those pieces of evidence that link to Dennis Rader?
Well, we're looking into several different things, but as far as finding the exact owner of those items, of course, I don't know if we'll ever get the answer to that. Dennis is the only one that truly knows where he got those items and what they came from. But what we're trying to do is find cases where similar items were possibly reported belonging to the victim or something related to the victim or that case that could have been, and then of course hoping that maybe some of these items might yield some DNA or something. And again, the length of time they were in the ground, I can't tell you whether it's going to retain anything or not, but we're certainly going to look at it very close. Again, we're also trying to get a list of the items that were collected in the original search warrant back in 2005 to see if any DNA testing was done on them, and if not, trying to move forward to get DNA testing on any of the bindings or clothing or anything that was collected at that time that hasn't been solved and hadn't checked to see if it matches to any of these other victims that we're looking at.
Sheriff Virden, I hope that you find resolution on these cold cases for these families and also for your officers. You've been working a long time on it. Stay in touch with us, please. We're going to stay on the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Sheriff Eddie Virden joining us.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of NewsNation's fact-driven coverage.